Hey, this is Travis with the Random Commuter. Thanks for joining me on my way to work and with this special SpaceX edition. So let's get going. Falcon Heavy, what is that? Well, if you don't know by now, I mean, their launch has been just splashed all over the place, which it's nice to see. It's nice to see everyone getting really excited about it, which is odd too, because Ariane rockets go up, ULA rockets go up, lots of rockets go up. In fact, the Electron rocket just recently made news. This uber small, like basically a modified sounding rocket, and that took off and achieved orbit, which is amazing. I mean, this rocket's tiny, but a couple things were going on with this. The SpaceX Falcon Heavy launch. Alright, let's get down to the nitty gritty. What is it? Alright, Heavy, I don't know the precise delineation, but Heavy implies, launching like a couple tons into space. So it requires a lot more energy. They're usually bigger. Compare that to Falcon 9, has a third of its output power. So, and Falcon 9 can do all sorts of shit. In addition to a number of things we're going to talk about, but because if you didn't guess, this particular episode is just going to be all SpaceX all the time. Just for this one. I'll get back to my spouting random nonsense on subsequent episodes. Alright, at the moment, commercial space lives in low Earth orbit. Lives there. To kind of give you a perspective where that is, low Earth orbit's a little bit lower than the space station, and like got things like geosynchronous orbit, which is all that means is it can see. It's got 1/3 the coverage, a little bit of overlapping, so you've got really high up. Geosynchronous orbit just means that as the world turns, this thing turns with it. That's all. Geostationary, there's a difference between geostationary and geosynchronous, and I forget which one's which, but I know geostationary has to do with like whether or not you're geosynchronous at the equator or not. If there's any inclination, here's the equator, here's an inclination. If there's any inclination, it's geosynchronous. Fact check me on this, because I'm going to get into a little bit of fact checking, because like I said, this SpaceX news has been huge. That's been kind of a question with heavy launch vehicles, is who's buying it? It's usually governments. they got big honking satellites. The Hubble Space Telescope is like this enormous thing. It took up like the entire cargo bay of the space shuttle. It's really big. Here's why the Heavy was so freaking cool. Elon Musk's been talking about the Heavy for a while. The idea was pretty simple. You just take three boosters, strap them together, and light the fuse. So Elon Musk's talking about there's quite a bit of dynamics and vibrations going on, put a lot of different types of stresses on the core. The core is the middle one. And they had to completely redesign and remodify the core. So the core is not your regular Falcon 9 rocket. It's unique to the Heavy. The side boosters are regular, and they were already flown before. And if you haven't seen a Falcon 9 landing, it's weird. It's weird to see every single time I see it. I remember, when was this? I want to say it was like 8 years ago or something like that. And I was tooling around on the internet, and I think this is when I really started, getting into. It's like I've always been a fan of space, but like really wanting to study it. And so I came across the Grasshopper tests. And the Grasshopper was SpaceX's first, I think it was in response to some sort of competition or prize. You take up your vehicle, whatever it is, and it's VTOL, basically demonstrating control of a vertical takeoff and landing. So it goes up, has to go to a certain height, has to go over a certain amount, and then come down in a controlled landing. So I watched this grasshopper test. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was this thing with this big, huge rocket, looked like out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon, was just hovering and just staying put in the middle of the air. It was so weird. And that's what got my attention, with SpaceX particularly. I wasn't around during, I think I kind of heard in the news about the Falcon 1 launches and everything, but holy crap, that was just nuts. I was mesmerized by that. And so from then on, I started watching closely. After a Falcon 9 goes up and delivers a payload into low Earth orbit, the rocket does a retro burn to slow it down, because orbit's all about speed, not height. And then it comes back in the atmosphere. Now, it comes back in ass first. You think it would, go nose first. No, there's no nose coming on this thing. It's already delivered its payload, so it's just this cylinder with a flat head. So it's coming down ass first, past supersonic speeds, and has to slow down. So it does a couple burns to kind of slow down, get itself right so it doesn't burn up as it's coming through the atmosphere, because it's going so freaking fast. And then this thing lands on either on the ground to save on fuel, so it doesn't have to do a retro burn too much. It's been landing on it's called a drone ship. It's just a floating barge out in the middle of the ocean, and it comes and just lands on this relatively small thing. If you're thinking about like this ballistic missile flying through the air, and it comes down, a controlled landing on this ship that's just pitching and rolling and doing all this shit, and it does that, and its success rate for doing that is actually pretty good. Watching these landings, if you haven't seen one yet, which is, these landings are all over the internet. Watch one if you haven't seen one. It's mesmerizing. It's absolutely mesmerizing. Falcon Heavy goes up. Oh man, Elon Musk was giving himself 50-50 on the odds, and I was predicting 25% failure. I came to about 18%, but I wanted to factor in new technology as well. This is a test launch, I believe, using technology they'd never used before and a flight configuration they'd never used before. So this was a new flight for the Corps. Business as usual on the boosters, new flight for the Corps. So that's why I put it at a failure, chance of failure, 25%. I put it there. Elon Musk put it at 50. Given that, and just the lead-ups and the excitement, they hauled the Heavy out to launch pad 39A at Cape Canaveral. I was just sitting there, getting all the fuel in it. It's like huffing and puffing and doing its thing. It just looks ready to go. And I had a meeting. I had to make a presentation, and I was like, damn it, I'm gonna miss this. And so then it was delayed by 2 hours, so I was good. I was still at work, but I could watch it. I'm not gonna reschedule a meeting for this. Work comes first, and you gotta do it. That's how it has to be. And so this thing lights up, and everyone just starts going nuts just from the engines firing up. The Falcon Heavy not immediately exploding. It starts to lift off, and I've never been so scared. I was so scared for the Falcon Heavy. I'm sitting there going, it's gonna go, it's gonna explode right now, and now. I'm like just waiting for this thing to explode. I didn't want it to explode, but I was like, there's no way this thing is not gonna explode. And it just kept climbing, and it looked amazing. It looked absolutely amazing. And of course, since you have to have a test payload, some kind of ballast, it could either be a block of concrete, a wheel of cheese, it could be a lot of things. This was Tesla's new Roadster, But this thing's sitting there on like this, like, you know, this secured anchored platform, and it's got like all these cameras around it because goddamn right it's got cameras on it. I'm still just geeking out about how this looked in space because I'll get there, it gets to space. So this thing keeps climbing. Now, there's a thing called max Q, which is the maximum dynamic pressure as the spacecraft is moving through the atmosphere, and the speeds it gets up to as just before it breaks the sound barrier, it's going through that I think it's called bow shock on you know, just passing through the sound barrier. Ask Chuck Yeager about it. So as it gets there, I'm like, this is it. It's gonna explode. It's gonna explode. This is it. I was just this pucker factor, as Elon Musk would call it, the pucker factor. I was sitting on my desk in my cube at work, and just like, nah. And it busts through that, and I'm like, that's it. It's smooth sailing. I mean, you get past that point. If you get past that, you're gravy. Everybody's always gravy if they get past that. They got past that. Jesus. So a lot of things are going on at once. So they get up to right before orbital insertion. I forget which happens first. No, all right, the booster separation happens first. Boosters separate, crowd goes nuts. So I know what's coming. They're coming back down, and I know what the simulation looks like. They're coming back down at the same freaking time. They're gonna maneuver through the atmosphere, landing like, I don't know, something like 50 yards apart or something like that. Fact check me. They're gonna be landing at the same time in the same frame, you know, the same camera frame. That's what I was like, ah! And then I know what's about to happen when the fairing, the nose cone, opens up to deliver its payload. That opens up. All of a sudden, David Bowie's Spaceman, I think, starts playing. It just adds to the insanity of the people watching. You see this payload get delivered. You see a car in orbit. It's weird. It's really weird. And that is not even really the weird part yet. There's a lot of weird things that are coming up. I know the boosters are coming back, so I'm watching the cameras down at the bottom. And it's got 3 because the center core is coming back. It's going to the drone ship, and the 2 are coming back to land. The 2 side boosters come back to land. So, if everything went right, I'm speaking past tense now, all 3 would have landed at the same time, like just bloop. And the crowd goes wild. So the center core misses its mark, runs out of fuel. It doesn't run out of fuel. That's a fact check. It does not run out of fuel. The engines, 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3 out of the 5, something like that, they don't reignite. Not enough retro propulsion for a soft landing. Comes in at 300 miles an hour, barely misses, actually clips the side of the drone ship, and I'm getting all this information afterwards because the feed cut out. Hey, by the way, people crying foul when the feed goes out or something goes wrong, that ain't it, buddy. It's an electromagnetic pulse of the retro rockets knocking out the camera. And somebody online actually illustrated this point very well. Every single time the feed is cut out, it has been from a drone ship. The drone ship feed is not hardwired. The feeds on land are. Alright? Okay? So, almost every single time, if it's a drone ship, you get an interruption in the signal. So let's talk about the different pieces of the rocket. So you've got, well, particularly with the Heavy, you got the center core, everything's attached to it, and it's part of the propulsion. Now, there's a couple different configurations that people talk about, and that is how the whole unit uses up fuel. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. One, the center, the core doesn't use any fuel, or maybe just a lot less burn, and just lets the side ones do all the work. And there's an even distribution configuration that you can do where all of the fuel is kind of being consumed at once, but there's a lot of like cross feeds as you feed the fuel into the center, which is much more complicated setup. I believe the Falcon Heavy had kind of like an independent setup where fuel was not being fed into the center core. The side boosters are just Falcon 9 rockets. These are the same Falcon 9s that have just been going up right and left, delivering all sorts of payloads for all sorts of companies in all different countries. That's just, and this was kind of the weird thing. It had a nose cone. It didn't have like a fairing, the payload fairing. So it's got this little just nose cone cap to keep it aerodynamic. And there is no reason to get rid of it. So it stayed on the whole time during the landings. That was really weird to see, like an actual pointy thing kind of. Forget it. All right, so you've got the two side boosters, which are just Falcon 9 rockets. Now you've got, so this is all the first stage. The second stage is just a smaller rocket on top of the first stage. Now, the reason why you stage things is so that once you've used up all your fuel, getting the entire rocket out of the hard part, which is Earth's main gravity well in the atmosphere. That's the hard part. You can use much smaller rocket. You can dump everything else, dump it, get rid of it. All the other companies just dump it into the ocean or something like that. And then you don't have this elephant on your back as you ignite the engine for the second rocket to do either get your elevation or do your orbital insertion mover or go out into space. Now on top of the second stage is the payload. And the payload is just whatever you're launching into space. Whether with the shuttle program, the payload was essentially the shuttle itself. The payload's the satellites. The payload is the Tesla Roadster in this case, but it's whatever it's delivering to space. The basic thing is you launch, you ditch the first stage comes back to Earth. The second stage lights, goes into orbit, circularizes it, or goes into whatever orbit inclination that they want. And then, but everything on a Falcon 9 at least has been recovered at some point successfully, except for the second stage. That's cool. I don't know if a fairing has been reused. I'd be curious. But basically it's all about the first stage. It's the most expensive portion of the rocket. SpaceX fanboy shit. This is normal SpaceX fanboy knowledge. So the two side boosters come down and they land at the exact same time. It wasn't the exact same time. They did a little offset so that the radars wouldn't interfere with each other. They looked like they came down at the same time. They danced like they came down at the same time. You gotta check out this video of these. It's weird to see. It looks, every single thing about the launch, you want to talk conspiracy nuts out there? They got a case. All this shit looks fake as hell. But that's what's crazy about it. It looks so fake. And that's why I appreciate it, because you know it's all real. Now I haven't even gotten to the craziest part. So the second stage takes it doesn't even detach from the second stage, but it takes the payload, the Tesla, into I believe it was a polar orbit, which is a 90-degree inclination, I think. But the whole idea is the Air Force wanted, I guess they asked, paid for, requested, whatever, goodwill. They asked SpaceX to put it into a high polar orbit so that it can cook in the Van Allen belts. Now, what are the Van Allen belts, you ask? Let's make sure I don't get this wrong. The Earth has an electromagnetic field. Low Earth orbit is below this field. It's inside the field, but these really concentrated bands of energy that are in this field, apparently they've got a really measurable effect on spacecraft and all that. But the thing is, you're not in them that much if you're going through it. Like the Apollo program, they were just going right through it. And they're like, yeah, it's not good, but we're not sitting there. The Air Force wanted the Tesla. I'm just going to call it the Tesla. They wanted the Falcon Heavy second stage Tesla payload to just sit up there in that high orbit and cook. Just sit there and sit in the Van Allen belts and just cook. Which it did. About 6 hours. And then after 6 hours, they did, I don't even know what you call it. It's a Mars orbital insertion burn. This is where we're going to get to some specifics where I've seen a lot of inaccuracies on the internet. And if I'm identified as an accuracy, it's a fucking blunder, okay? But it's going to do a burn that just takes it out into the outer solar system. When I say outer solar system, I don't mean any further than the asteroid belt. And for a little point of reference, because I know that there's been a lot of confusion about this too, Earth is the third rock from the sun. Well remembered. And then further out is the Mars position. Further out from that is the asteroid belt. Right beyond that is Jupiter. Okay, that's where the outer solar system starts. It may start at the asteroid belt, but anyway, so you got Mars, asteroid belt, Jupiter. I want to be really clear about something on the asteroid belt. If you could see another asteroid from the surface of one of the asteroids in the asteroid belt, you'd be really lucky. So let's just be real clear about the density of the asteroid belt. It's not dense. Stop it with that. They did this burn that takes this really elliptical orbit. Now here's the deal with elliptical versus circular orbits. You can use elliptical orbits for different things because it's kind of nice to get further out from a body, then come in closer and get like close things. So you can use that, right? But most satellites want a circular orbit, so it doesn't come in too close, too far. Its distance is constant. So this orbit, which is now the Tesla's now in orbit around the sun. This is really elliptical. So what it's going to do, if the sun's here, it's going to come way out here into the asteroid belt and then come around the sun and, you know, shoot past the position where Earth was when it launched. Earth's not going to be there, you know, when it comes back around. So that's what this thing is doing. Now, let's get one thing straight. The Tesla is not headed for Mars at all. The Tesla will not be in Mars' orbit. When I say orbit, I mean the same orbit that Mars is in, or with respect to the sun. So you have Mars here, you've got Tesla here, but Tesla's gonna pass that orbit. The orbit does not imply, the heliocentric orbit, the orbit around the sun, does not imply it's orbiting around Mars. A lot of mainstream news is getting that wrong. Which is weird. Business Insider got that wrong, which I thought was very strange. Business Insider is a trusted source as far as I'm concerned. I use it a lot for school and everything, so no, they got that wrong. It was weird. So yeah, it's just this enormous elliptical orbit around the sun. You have 2 points of you have a lot of points of reference when you talk about orbits, but two of them are the perihelion and the aphelion. Hopefully I pronounced that right. And that's similar to perigee and apogee, but the only thing is perigee and apogee have to do with the Earth, and perihelion and aphelion have to do with respect to the sun. Okay, aphelion is the furthest point away in elliptical orbit, and perihelion is the closest. Okay, but not for a very long time. It's gonna take months to get out there. I think months. Yeah. A normal optimal Omen transfer. I'm sorry, I'm throwing a lot of terms out here. Can take anywhere from 3 months to 9 months, depending on how fast you want to get there and how much energy you want to use to slow down. And that's, you know, really basic shit. You've got the Earth on the inside orbit here, you got Mars on the outside, and the spacecraft, all it's doing is just going, that's an Norman transfer. The grand finale. This thing, this roadster that's in outer space right now is doesn't have solar panels, doesn't have a nuclear generator, doesn't have anything like that. It's just the same fucking car that you'd be driving on the road. Well, I wouldn't be driving it, somebody rich would be. Its battery works, but I don't know if it's using a Tesla battery or if it's using another battery that they slapped on the base, because this whole thing's attached to like this base thing, you know, to kind of hold all the cameras and everything. And I don't know if it's got other functions, but anyway. Instead of sending a block of concrete out, we sent this thing. So it doesn't have solar panels, doesn't have anything. It's got 12 hours of power, which is, by the time of this, you know, me posting this, that power is long gone. But it was able to take these pictures and transmit them, at these super high elevations. These pictures are incredible. You've got to check these pictures out. They are nuts. You've got the hood picture facing, because there's this mannequin in a spacesuit, which is a real spacesuit that SpaceX is developing. But he's sitting there in a spacesuit it's not a convertible, it's just, you know, I don't know, I think you call it a target top. There's no roof on this roadster. Just sitting there, and he's doing this. He's got one arm on the door, and the other hand is just like sitting here. And he's just, and there's a little thing on the dash that says "Don't panic." That's a reference to A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which Elon Musk just loves that book. You know what? I tried to give that book a shot. My really good friend, we'll call him Dick. He loves that book, and you know, everyone's been saying my whole life, "Oh, you gotta read that. You gotta read that." I'm like, okay. I got about halfway through, and I'm like, what is this for? I'm not cool enough to get it. I'm sorry. I don't get it. I don't get it. Maybe I just didn't get the hype. They start taking these pictures from the back, from the front, and from the side. And from the side, it just looks nuts. All this shit looks fake as hell. And Elon Musk actually made a good mention about something. He said, there's no atmospheric occlusion. There's no distortion. The space image is about as pure as it gets. That's what shit looks like. So you have to. I'm not going to do it justice describing these pictures. You have to see it. But one of them is the last picture they got before transmission stopped. The Earth is in the background, and the elevation is so high. The Earth is, I mean, you can tell really far out from the Earth. It looks nuts, and that's a real thing. Anyway, I guess I'm done gushing over that. Just check out the pictures. You have to see it, because it looks absurd. It looks absolutely absurd. You may as well have a clown juggling on a unicycle. I mean, it looks that crazy. But I do remember like watching like the Gemini missions, and when that guy got out of the spaceship, and he's just like, "Whoa." That looks kind of crazy too. I mean, that's nuts. You just no. So yeah, that happened, and with the exception of the core kind of crashing and burning, everything else was perfect. And all this stuff to go right, and so many systems and phases that this thing went through, everything went right. Did everything go as planned? I don't know. I don't know the actual mission design, because the actual mission design was to put it in a Mars orbit. But I think that Elon just said, burn it all. Burn it all. See how far we get. and just burned up the rest of the second stage. This was just the rest of the fuel left in the second stage. Now they had to do 3 burns with the I think 3 burns with the second stage, and all this does not include the initial burn getting off the ground. So you've got the first burn after separation, second stage separation, and that is to take it from this suborbital ballistic trajectory to an orbital trajectory. So you make the burn tangent to your direction, and that's your orbital insertion burn. The second burn was to position it where, for the Van Allen belts, fry session. And then you have the third burn. Hey, correct me, fact check me, but you got the third burn that puts it into the, it's supposed to be the Mars orbital insertion, but the Tesla is not following a flight path, an orbital path. That's, that the asteroids are on. It kind of crosses it, but the Tesla is much more eccentric. The eccentricity of the Tesla orbit around the sun is much higher, much more eccentric. That was me gushing over the Falcon Heavy, and I think I'm not alone in that. I mean, everyone went crazy for this. They absolutely loved it. All sorts of people. I was watching video of just these people on Cocoa Beach over by over Cape Canaveral, and you can tell from the tone of someone's voice whether or not they're really into something or whatever. And, because SpaceX geeks are SpaceX geeks. Space geeks in general are space geeks in general. But these guys are like, holy fucking shit, that was amazing. It's like, and these guys are at Cocoa Beach, or maybe even their residents, These guys see this shit all the time. But they're like, oh my God. But especially when the 2 boosters came back down, they're like, ha ha! And it's not like they were like right up next to it. They were just like, it's kind of off the distance. They're like, geez. He's like, that was cool as hell, bro. That it was, buddy. That it was. Well, thanks for joining me on my way to work and talking about this special edition for the SpaceX Heavy Launch. Congratulations to Elon Musk and SpaceX. If you like that, go ahead and hit subscribe, and make sure to hit the like button. Hey, any of these fact checkers out there regarding orbital mechanics, SpaceX, Elon Musk, Falcon Heavies, rocketry in general, please go ahead and leave those comments there and any corrections. And I actually really appreciate that. And until then, I will see you next time.